Welcome to yet another conversation of PhD, the philosophical drama. I am Amogh, and with my friend Sukanya, we are discussing the process behind a PhD and not exactly the science. Now, Michelle Obama, the former First Lady of the United States, once in her tweet suggested that it is high time that we start giving ourselves a priority in our to-do lists. And we all know that it is not the quantity of time that we spend at work that matters for success, but instead it's the quality of the time that matters a lot. But is it possible to actually put this theory into practice? And what happens in a situation where you have to strive hard to attain a degree called PhD? How do you maintain the PhD life balance? And to discuss this and to know a story of such a wonderful PhD person, we have today Dr. Jerrin George, who has completed his PhD from IISER Pune. He's a very dear friend of mine, and I think he has very interesting insights into how to maintain this PhD life balance. So let us all invite him. He's joining us from the United States of America, where he's doing his postdoc at the Columbia University. Let me try and add him to this live feed.
Hey,
Hello, Jerrin.
hi Mo.
Hi. Firstly, welcome to this show, and good to see you up in the morning on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Uh, so before I go dive into your PhD story, I'm going to ask you about going backwards in some sense. When you finished the PhD,
hmm
uh, how distorted or how well balanced your life was at that time?
Okay, so you asked me how complicated my PhD was? Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, how was the situation when you started, and once you finished, what was it like?
I don't know. So when I started my PhD, I never thought I'd complete it. That's the first thing that's how it all started for me.
Okay.
It was quite, I didn't have much lab experience, I would say. I was sort of like a fresh PhD in my lab, and most of the people in my lab came with some sort of like industrial experience or something like that. They were
Hmm. Yeah.
working for 2 years or something. And then that was so completely, I mean, I was like from there, like the very scratch, knowing nothing. And so I think I learned it, like I learned things slowly. And I always had this thing, I was always worried all throughout my first 2 years, am I ever going to get a degree or will I get thrown out like within. So that was always my worry. And also since again like both of us were in the integrated PhD program of IISER Pune, uh,
Right.
I was also worried, okay, if I get thrown out from the PhD, do I also not get an MS degree? So yeah, so that was sort of my main worry. But then yeah, things worked out.
Yeah, but what was it like when you actually got your PhD? I'm going to kind of go in a movie style, in a flashback zone.
hmm
But before I go there, I want to know what was it like when you actually got it, because you were thinking you will never get it.
it felt relaxing, I'd say. And then, of course, it was, I mean, getting PhD was pretty happy moment for me. I mean, although because of the pandemic, it was not exactly how we imagined it to be, but then still I mean, it was pretty nice. I mean, the fact that you can actually write a doctor right in front of your name. So that was pretty,
Right.
I mean, but then, yeah. So, but then getting PhD, I mean, I never, again, looking back from the moment I got the degree and looking back all the way how I was worried, then I think that maybe I never had to worry so much. Maybe if someone was there to help me out or just tell me, hey, this is how it works. So this is how PhD works.
Right.
Maybe it would have been different, but then you got to experience it, right? Anyway.
Right. Right. Well,
Yeah,
you have a chance to do that to your juniors right now by telling your
of course.
your views and your story.
Yeah.
Uh, Take me in the last few years now. I'm just going in a reverse direction.
Okay.
When take me to the last 2 years before you got your PhD, when you really have to strive hard in finishing up experiments. You have
Yeah,
to finish up writing papers, and the timetable kind of a thing is not really valid in your life.
yeah. Uh,
What was it?
I'd say the last 2 years was the most hectic part. I mean, one of the major reason was towards the end of my PhD. That was when, I mean, so we had to wrap up a lot of stuff. We had a collaboration going on in Delhi, so we had to finish that story too. So it was like a lot of things to do in terms of, in terms of work. But then always something I wanted to, keep a balance again in my PhD, like take time as in like past 7:30, no, I'm not going to work. I have my own life after that. So that was something I was very much strict about. I say, okay, of course, I'm not saying I'm very much for that, but then if times work is there, you would have to stay back till 9 o'clock, or it's fine. That's one day or once in a week, it's fine, or twice in a week.
Right.
But then if you make it your routine, going to be difficult. But then answering your question, last 2 years was sort of the difficult part where you wanted, like you have a lot of different projects and you have to meet ends for all those projects and you need to complete it. So yeah, so in terms of doing technical stuff and completing it, yes, the last 2 years were crucial, I'd say.
Right, right. You mentioned that you were kind of very sure that you did not want to stay in lab beyond 7:30 almost every day.
Hmm.
And how did it pan out in the entire academia setup? Because you've seen people around working till probably 1 a.m. in the morning,
Hmm.
every odd day, and people coming up at 9 o'clock in the morning and staying 12, 14 hours.
Yeah.
Uh, how did it pan out for you that this is what I want and this is how it will work for me?
I'd say, I mean, when you see your coworkers working, let's say past like 7 o'clock, you see them working like till maybe 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. There's some sort of peer pressure that builds up, like, okay,
Yeah,
competitive pressure that comes up. Okay, oh, you need, I mean, they're working, that you need to work too. I
yeah,
mean, catch up with them, so you need to work. But then I think I mean, I think it's more than work hours. It's smart work, which is important. It's not about like you plan your work a day, you go ahead and finish your work, and then sort of go back home, reboot yourselves, watch something, or go to the gym, or do something. And
right,
that is quite important, I feel, in sort of rebooting yourselves and refreshing, just the way you just hit a refresh in your computer.
right,
It's important for a PhD life, because otherwise, what happens again, this is my personal opinion, is that if you stress out, let's say you're working till like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock every single day, you're coming to the lab at 9 o'clock morning and then leaving at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock every day. It'll work out for maybe let's say a month or 2 months, but then what happens eventually is that when things don't work out for you, that's when you get really frustrated, and you
right.
don't want that. That's where you have to hit a balance, that you know that okay, things are not working in the lab, you can actually do something else, and then you can do something creative, and you gotta, that will sort of refresh yourselves for yeah, your next.
Yeah, yeah, quite interesting point. So you said about to-do lists.
Hmm.
Uh, so how because you had this regime of not really spending time beyond 7:30 in the lab,
Hmm.
how important in your PhD was making a plan for the week or for say for one or two experiments that will go on for a while? How important was making that plan?
It was quite important. I mean, you need to sort of understand like what are the experiments you need to plan, in terms of you don't want to waste time in the lab too.
Right,
Like for example, one thing I'd say, one way we could save time is in the lab. Again, work culture is, let's say you spend a lot of time. Let's say going out for a coffee with your friends in during your PhD, or when you, I mean, a day, let's say you get exhausted with your work. I mean, you should really put a deadline on what is the time you want to. If I'm saying it all matters when you're actually leaving the lab at 7:30 and then you want to do something else after 7:30. All these things matter. You need to know where to put a full stop for a conversation when you're having chai with your friends or you're having uh,
Yeah.
going somewhere or you're doing something. You should know what's the like. You need to plan your experiments properly. Uh, Again, like I said, smart work. You try to finish off things quickly,
Right.
and maybe okay. Like for example, I would prefer going on like Saturdays, Sundays. Usually, I don't. I sometimes I work morning of Saturdays. I do some work, but preferably I'll be like, for example, I'll be doing something interesting. Like I'll be going out. I used to do photography, not actively later part, but I used to do something. It's not exactly one particular thing I used to do. Let's say Saturday was something important for me for dining. Let's say I'll go for dinner at a good place. I enjoy, good food, or I'll be going to the gym on certain days, or if it's possible, if I'm not too lazy, or
Right.
so that's sort of, I mean, you could again plan yourselves like what are the things you do. I mean, there are, of course, for example, if you're doing some tissue culture work and you can't, I mean, your cells are going to become competent by, let's say, this particular day. But then you can still not work too much. You can just come to the lab quickly, finish it off, and then go. I'm not saying that, of course, it all depends on the domain of work. Let's say in biology or in chemistry, you have two different working style, I can say. For example, in
Right.
biology, you need to keep track of, for example, you're culturing something, or you need to have a constant. You need to go back and check. But then I'm saying you don't have to. Maybe you can decrease the work. Maybe you could just spend 1 hour in the lab. And I mean, it's
Right.
very critical. You have to. Plan it ahead. That's the whole point.
Right. Right. So you talked about not really spending time on the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something I have a kind of a tricky question, because you have seen that there is this weekend work culture in academia,
Mm-hmm.
extensively across labs, across doesn't matter which year of PhD you are in,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, you talked about refreshing, rebooting. Uh, what do you think about this thing, which is called like spending time in lab is equated to the amount of work you're doing? Because that may not be always true.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, spending time in the lab is not equated to the work that you do, because many a times what we'd be just doing in lab would be doing not work essentially. We'll be just doing something else. We'll be talking to some people, or we'd be. I mean, I have seen people. I'm not like there are cases where I've seen some people would be enjoying sitting in the lab, maybe listening to music, or they'd be having something in the background. But the point is, you're still there in the lab, and you have that thing in your head that, hey, I
Right.
spend I spend 9 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the evening in the lab, but that's not really true. You have not actually spent 9 to 9. It's if you actually take out those time you went for coffee, or if you had a chit chat with your friends for, let's say, 1 hour, or you had been doing something else, then it's not effective time. Then you don't actually say that. I mean, you've actually been in the lab from 9 to 9. I would say that you've been just maybe 9 to 6. Uh,
Right.
I mean, it's just that in your brain it looks like 9 to 9, and then you would be just thinking, "Oh, I have been working from 9 to 9. I don't have any other life, and that's the only thing I'm having in the lab is. I mean, I'm work. I'm just doing in the lab is work, 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 and then you don't get any chance to again refresh or reboot. So
Right. Right.
yeah. So spending time effectively in that particular lines too is also important. I mean, don't have that misconception that just because you are staying in the lab from 9 to, let's say, 10 or 11 o'clock means that you are actually been working in the lab, uh,
Right.
doing some work.
So it's basically you believe in effective management of your time in the lab, and then having your own time after it.
Yeah.
And uh, how you said you were doing a bit of photography, going to the gym or other things. Uh, how was it after going out of the lab? Because I've heard stories. I have my own experience when say you are watching a movie with your friends, you're still thinking about some experiment going on in the lab or something that you want to do next day morning. It's switch on, switch off thing does not always work or does not effectively work for PhD students because they, even if physically they are out of the lab, their minds are still in the lab.
Hmm.
In your experience, how would that happen, and how would you try to, completely take you out of that zone?
I mean, I'd say that you don't have to be. I mean, of course, you would be thinking about some experiment, like specifically, or you would be, you'd be having some thought about, okay, what would I be doing? I mean, that's not what I mean by actually. I like you can of course plan your experiments in your head, or you could just think about some idea or something when you are having some free time. But what I mean by, I mean, go away from the lab after 7:30 or spend every time away from the lab is like do something which you really like. I mean, that might be different for different people. Like some people, what like I'd say that my PI also had this. He loved movies, so he used to watch movies. So that's the way he told me that that's the way he used to reboot himself. And other way he used to do when he used to, let's say, play some sport, he used to play tennis or something like that. So he used to try to learn new things. And that's something that I also would like to try to do. Like I would not maybe, let's say, even though I like photography, it doesn't mean that I'll be doing every week. I'll be going out for
Right, right.
something.
No, what I meant was, how do you take off that weight of thinking about your PhD when you are actually out of the lab? Because it's otherwise it's not an effective refreshing zone, right? You are not effectively refreshing or
Yeah,
rebooting.
yeah.
Your minds are still stuck in the lab in your experiments,
Mhm.
but you're trying to do something else that will be a refreshing activity.
I mean, I'd say again, I don't hear again completely. I don't feel that you need to be completely out of the lab, and since you can't think about the lab again at all. No, you can think about the lab. What I'm saying is, you can do something else. You don't have to be. I mean, it's not like you like. Let's say you are actually engaging in some activity, like let's say you are going to the gym. It's not like when you're gymming or when you're watching a movie, you'd be always thinking, "Hey, what is the reaction that? How is the reaction going in the lab?" I mean, you can't do that. I mean,
Right.
I think you should not do that. I mean, I'm not saying that you should be constantly worrying about what's happening in the lab, but you can have like things like maybe once in a while, maybe when the movie is over, or maybe you're having a break in between, or you are actually going to the gym, or in between. Let's say you have a thought about one experiment, or does it work? Or maybe it works. Okay, that's how you could do that. I mean, that's perfectly fine. That's not going to be affecting in terms of, I mean, the refreshment or the rebooting, I'd say. I mean,
Right.
uh, yeah, so all it matters is do something different. I mean, outside what you regularly do, so that you get time to, I mean, do something else apart from. So it's not so that you just say at the end of the day, "Hey, I was just doing only my PhD. I was all the time in the lab." No, you have your life. You need to do something else too.
Or just have a life. You may
Exactly.
not need to do something else. You just
Mm,
need to have your own time, whatever you want to do about it, right?
mm,
Uh, but this interesting work culture that you're talking about,
mhm,
which you started following, I'm sure it did not like magically happen with you, right? You must have had to work on it, think actively about doing it.
mhm,
So take me through the first few years now, first years of PhD, where, as you said, you were a fresher, you were not having a whole lot of lab experience.
mhm,
So setting this work culture, setting up what you're trying to do in your PhD must have
mhm.
been hard, must have taken a lot of efforts.
Yeah.
So how was it that time?
So I'd say that where I got this whole, what, who taught me or who asked me to, be like this is actually, I had been an intern in, this is Professor Kamath in Notre Dame. He works on solar cells. So I was an intern, short-time intern in that lab for maybe, let's say, I think 3 months or something, 2 months.
Mhm.
And that work culture in the lab was something that really inspired me. How the people, how they would actually sort of plan things properly. They would be, I was a mess that time. I was really a mess that time. I'd say that I
Yeah.
was the person who used to think that, okay, I used to spend, maybe I never came to lab on time. I never understood what was the importance of coming to lab on time, or let's say, or what is effective work at all. But the work culture in the lab, particularly, he was quite, to be frank, he was very uh, important for actually making me realize that uh, that you need to actually carve out time for yourselves once you're out of the lab, and then you need to have. It's not like, again, if work is what is important, and just not like being in the lab all the while. And when I started my PhD, of course, I felt sort of pressure there, because I saw some of the labs would be working. Uh, like they'd be working like on Sundays, they'd be working on some of them. You can see them all throughout. It'll be just like whenever you go to the lab, even if you don't want to do something, you just go to the lab on Sundays to grab something, and then you just see that they're also working, and then you have this peer pressure, especially in the first year. There, I still remember another incident was when I was working. I was also having this pressure that I should be working on a Sunday, and I think I was doing HPLC on a Sunday, and then my PI comes in, was like, "Hey, what are you doing on a Sunday? You should not be here."
Okay, that's interesting to know.
Yeah, so that was sort of, relief. Okay, then I was like, okay, he doesn't expect me to be on Sundays to be in lab. I mean, it's not like you are being there on pressure, and then I'm saying that, okay, you have something, you need to do something urgently, and then you need to go. I mean, that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. But then everyone requires time to reboot, and I feel that it's only when you reboot that you can actually, reach your full potential, or full efficiency, I can say. When you come to the lab next day morning, I mean, you have to be fresh.
Right.
When you come to a Monday morning, when you come to the lab, you can't be you can't have in your mind about the column that did not work on Friday, not Friday, I'm sorry, on a Saturday, Sunday, or
Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can't be thinking about that. Rather, you should be like, hey, that column did not work on a Friday. What do we actually do different to make it work? Or
Yeah.
what set of experiments we can do otherwise to make things work? So that's only when you refresh. I mean, that's the same thing I'd say if people, maybe fifth year PhDs or fourth year PhDs would have realized that when you start writing a manuscript, you write a lot. Let's say you've been writing from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, maybe not even 3 o'clock. After a while, you're just writing, and you realize that you don't get any more way. You don't get how to actually. You don't become creative anymore. You would actually
Right.
start going in the, say, you'd be thinking in the same lines that you've been thinking in, and it'd be just you can't get words. You don't know what to put in. So haven't you realized that when you come the next day, and then you realize that, okay, things start coming in, and then you get more. The same thing, it's applicable for work too, I feel, that if you sort of refresh yourselves, you would actually have much, I mean, effective work the next.
Right. Right. I'm going to come to writing a little later, but
Hmm?
uh, since you mentioned about breaks and everything, one crucial part is because most of the PhD students are staying away from their homes.
Hmm.
They are staying in a different city, in a different state, or sometimes even in a different country when people come abroad for their PhD. Uh, how important was it for you to take a break of, say, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, go back home? Uh, and how frequently you think taking that break was good in your setup?
I'd say that, yeah, you need to take break. You need to take break. You need to go back home. You have a family back home. It's very important, way more important than your work, I'd say. You have to, of course, you need long-term breaks too. Means when you're
Mhm.
actually working for a year, and you need to, you have, that's the whole point of giving a leave for this many days. Uh,
Right.
Same way you have the idea of, you have a weekend, you have a Sunday off. That's the whole point.
Right.
So, you need to actually take time, maybe do something to refresh, go back to your family, or go out for a family, tour or something. Or let's say you want to travel, you want to go for a trek, or you want to do something different. I'd say that's the time where you sort of do the, so you have this weekly refresh rebooting, and then you have the whole yearly rebooting, which is quite important again. Uh,
Right. Right.
like you take something is not working for you, or something is not, you're not really writing your thesis effectively, and you get really frustrated, go take a break. Go take a break, come back after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then you'll feel way more refreshed and be ready to work, I feel.
Yeah, how were your breaks? I mean, what you would do during your breaks, and how frequently were your breaks?
My frequency of breaks, what I used to, I mean, whatever I had breaks in a year, I used to almost take the whole breaks, I would say. So I used to go back to my, especially since I was in Pune and then my parents were in Kerala, I had to
Right.
go back. And I think that was something I realized that, hey, your parents are also becoming old, and you need to actually spend time with them. You need to go back and see them. It's not like once you, after all, you just get to see them once a year or twice a year or once a year, right?
Right.
So, I mean, it's important that way you can go back home and then maybe you report yourselves. Otherwise, one way I have at times, maybe if I had already gone home, I would actually plan for doing something else. We'll go for first either I'll go for a like we'll plan a like trip with friends or something, or yeah, once I've actually gone for a trek. I'd say once there was just once in my PhD, but I mean altogether, I mean, it was, I mean, I feel it doesn't matter what, it all depends from person to person what you want to do, right? Like, for example,
Right.
for me, actually, I would spend with time with my family, or I would spend somewhere. The whole feeling of going home for me, like going back to Kerala, was a sort of refreshment for me. The whole greenery and everything was kind of like pretty sort of what got me rebooted. But then,
Yeah.
so it's different for different people. Maybe if they're already staying in, let's say, in the same place they are doing the PhD, their family is also over there, then it's important to do something else. Maybe to go on a trek, or go on a vacation, something, go for a road trip, or do something like, or even you don't have to go travel. You can actually, maybe you're doing something, you're trying to explore something that you've never explored. Let's say you're trying cooking. Okay, like you should try cooking, or you want to try drawing something. And I feel a lot of my, I mean, there are a lot of areas you would actually be interested in. And then you could actually know that that even when you're doing your PhD in your 28th or your 30s, it's not too late to actually see if you have something new to or new hobby or something.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
That's interesting. So, uh, coming back to writing, because you mentioned it a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Coming to the fag end of the PhD, you have this mammoth thing called writing your thesis,
Mm-hmm.
and probably alongside it, you have to write a few papers, submit some manuscripts, and get things done. And it's not always easy. So we see a lot of memes and a lot of jokes about writing your thesis, how difficult it is. Uh, Honestly, I feel there needs to be another level of work-life balance maintenance requirement at that level, because, as you said, you if you're writing from morning till evening, you cannot really go beyond that because you kind of are saturated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, was your experience a little different because you had this nice schedule set up for you, or did you have to do any changes for thesis writing time? How was your experience?
Uh, Thesis, I used to, I mean, one way, it all depends on person to person, I feel. You could plan your day so that maybe you do some like writing in the morning and then maybe work in the evening or something like that. I
So
mean, that
did you do that? Was
not
it
really
your practice?
my thesis. Mostly I was almost done with all the experiments, and I was just sitting with my thesis and writing it out. I had spent some time when I was doing some like I had overlapped a very short time when I was doing some experiments, but then that was not much. I could just plan my experiments, come back, write something, and I used to enjoy writing. I mean, that was me actually. So I'd say it was. I mean, I'd say that like that way it is. I mean, it's not just writing. I'd say let's say, if you're reading a paper, also it's also important that when you plan your experiments a week, it's also important to carve out time where you get to read literature, where you actually know, hey, what's going out in the world? What are people doing? I mean, does your research come at par with what people are doing outside? So that sort of gives you a picture, the broader picture or the big world picture. So
Right.
I think it's important to carve out some time in your week for reading, writing something. Let's say you can write some part. I mean, I'm not saying just thesis writing. Thesis writing, of course, we know it's all difficult. It's like all the end of your PhD. You need to spend time. You need to actually. It's not like you can be writing your thesis from the day one of your PhD, right? You need to actually carve out that time. I mean, no matter what, how well you plan, you need to actually. You would be ending and you need to finish. But then, of course, you can. What I feel is that you can write things during the PhD. For example, let's say you have
Mm-hmm.
to finish off, you have a manuscript to finish off, and then you can actually plan something in the week. And hey, I did a couple of experiments, this particular thing, and then maybe just write it down. Let's say for putting it to the, I mean, for the lab or something that, or making presentation. I mean, all these things are you have to do side by side with work. Thesis is again different. Thesis is something that you have to do towards the end of your PhD, but maintain
Mm-hmm.
equal balance for other things like writing, reading literature, all of them is really important in PhD. I think it's not just working, working, working.
Right. Right. Right.
I mean, I say that that's all important. That's all working. I mean, working, working in the sense it's not like, for, especially for the wet lab people, it's not just working, working. One thing is not, let's set up this reaction, let's set up that other assay or this particular biological assay. Is not that. You need to actually go back and like put yourselves like in, I mean, read literature. So, yeah, I mean, also spend some time to write, especially if people who are actually don't exposed to much writing. I would strongly advise them to actually carve out like some amount of time to write something in a.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. True. Looking at the bigger picture now, having gone through all the ups and downs of your PhD, trying to set up the schedule of PhD and life balance, uh, has it helped you to really do better in days of depression, frustration that one, of course, goes through during the PhD? So, has it helped you
Yes,
like to be
yes.
really strong because you have a time off every time from your lab?
Yes, it has helped me. That's what I would say that. I mean, that's sort of my testimony. So I used to like, I mean, when I used to, things are not do not work for me, or if I get really, oh, hey, this particular thing failed, and this is not how I expected it. So I would just go back and then sort of, I'll stop thinking about, hey, why is it not working? Why is it not working? I'll just go back, watch something. I mean, that's a way for me to refresh, watch a good movie or watch a TV series. And the next day I feel a bit more refreshed so that I can think that why did it not work, or is there something wrong with the way I did it, or is it just naturally how it should work. And I mean, that's science. So is that the way it should work? Uh,
Right.
so I feel, yeah, uh, in that way, I feel that it has helped me a lot. I mean, uh, it never got me frustrated with PhD, putting this balance, especially knowing that. I mean, that's what I always encourage my colleagues in my lab to, especially my juniors, that try to do something else apart from your PhD, like that you need to. I mean, so it's not just PhD that you focus your. I mean, I'm not saying that you should not. You should definitely focus as your career, but then equally you should have your own life where you actually do something else apart from that, so that you got, when things don't work in your PhD, you don't constantly think about, hey, it's not working, hey, it's not working. You have other things to do too, and then slowly things will start eventually working for you in your PhD too.
Right. Right. That's interesting. Uh, Before we end this conversation, I want to definitely talk about one amazing balance you had during your PhD at the fag end when you got married at the end of your PhD, just after submitting your thesis. So, as we spend the youth years in a lab doing our PhD, uh, you are a person who believes in giving equal importance to family and personal life. How beautiful, how nicely this was done by you. Planning your marriage and getting married just at the right time after submission of your thesis.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'd say that I used to, I mean, it's not just to do with, I mean, of course, in terms of specifically, I mean, if we were to talk specifically about marriage, and I'd say that I believed in actually carving out certain amount space in my week for my second best person. So I mean that's equally I think important where you don't I mean you that's also important in a relationship. I think you need to carve out space for your partner, and that's something I think that's very important, especially that's how I sort of think that okay, a weekend should that's weekend that's how like, let's say we both go out somewhere, even Saturday or something. I sort of stress that we need to go out for a dinner, or that's where you actually talk to the other person. Otherwise,
Right.
not talking, like you don't actually talk to the. So when you're all, I mean, alone from work, and even the thing is there, you don't have phone calls to attend, or you don't have anything. That's when you actually talk to the other person. So that way, I feel that's where the Sundays are important, especially Saturday evenings and Sunday is quite important, where you actually see a movie together, or you do something. Let's say you go out to a place together, see a new place, or have good food.
Mhm.
Depends on again people, for people it's very different, each person is very different, so
Mhm.
it's important to carve. I think it's helped me also in that particular line, I mean carving time for my partner.
Right, right. On that beautiful note, thank you once again
Mhm.
for joining us today and sharing your amazing views about PhD and life balance, and to make sure that you do not make PhD your life and let it be only a part of your life. Thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Amogh, for bringing me to your show, and thank you.
Yeah, see you.
Yeah.
You will probably have to, yeah. So that was my friend Jerrin George, who has amazing views about having a good work-life balance in any stressful career. It's something that is very, very important. And I hope most of us strive hard to giving ourselves the priority every time you are working in any career, be it a PhD or engineering or any other stream of science or arts or commerce. So, with this, we come to an end of this particular conversation, but our season continues and we'll have another interesting story next Sunday when Sukanya brings in another wonderful guest on the show. Till then, take good care of yourself and sanitize well, wear masks, and see you again.